and we parked beside the Lexus and just noted there was a black Lexus. Made a comment about the registration because it was unusual, and I telephoned the police.
At this point, the police had a real dilemma. They knew Moat had two men with him, Carl Ness and Kuram Awan. Ness was Moat's business partner and Awan was a friend who worked as a car mechanic. Neither man had a history of violence, and the police didn't know whether they were accomplices or being held against their will.
I've got two hostages at the minute, right?
Can you confirm we've got two hostages?
I've confirmed I've got two hostages, yes.
The hostage situation was a huge complication. Until you prove otherwise, you need to deal with them as genuine hostages, because if you don't, you're at risk of contributing to them being killed.
But the police had discovered letters from Ness and Awan written to their families. One in particular suggested they were anything but genuine captives.
It used expressions like, "I'm safer than safe." It didn't ring true for somebody who was genuinely being held against their will and genuinely fearing for their safety.
Shortly after police discovered the abandoned Lexus, Carl Ness and Kuram Awan were spotted walking down a main road near Rothbury.
The helicopter got up there very quickly and identified these two walking along the road. From the descriptions and the information and intelligence we had, it looked like it was our hostages, and I use the term carefully. We didn't know whether they were armed or not, so they had to be arrested in a safe and professional way. The only way to do that was with the armed officers.
Police used firecrackers as a distraction, and within seconds the two men were on the ground and cuffed.
I think the most frustrating part was that at that very, very point that we arrested them, I think we were probably within about 100 yards of Moat himself.
Eventually, Carl Ness and Kuram Awan were handed down life sentences for assisting Moat in his violent campaign of vengeance. But in the days to come, the police were to find themselves increasingly frustrated and under the media spotlight.
My hope, and I would have to say my expectation, was at that time we would very quickly find Moat, and it was quite disappointing that we didn't, because there was always the concern that he may have slipped a net.
Although they'd been unable to collar Moat at the same time as his accomplices, the police did find where he'd been camped out. Amongst the abandoned debris was a further vital clue to the killer's deeply disturbed state of mind.
Crucially, there was a dictaphone which Moat had spent quite a significant amount of time recording his thoughts. He started to express his dislike for the press and the media for perceived lies, and he decided then to make some specific threats towards the general public. And it was along the lines of, for the next lie that's printed, I will shoot an innocent member of the public.
Moat had been able to monitor how the hunt for him was going, and crucially, what was being said about him. He'd grown increasingly agitated at the exposure of his troubled family relationships.
The violent and dysfunctional nature of Moat's relationships with women passed over into his relationship with children as well. There were a number of incidents which speak volumes about his manner in dealing with children. He disciplined one child by forcing her to stand in the street with a jester's hat on and a sign around her neck saying that she'd been naughty. There were reports that he had beaten to death one of the family pet dogs in front of a child. So however much he would tell people, however much he held this belief that he wanted a stable family life with women and with children, a family, all of his behaviour undermined that.
Moat's own mother, who hadn't had much contact with him since his teenage years, even joined the ranks of her son's detractors. But Angus Moat tried to counter negative coverage of his brother.
I spoke to one reporter initially, just to get another side of it, Raoul, to say, look, this is out of character. You know, he's had some kind of breakdown. But I did want to get that message over that he hadn't been abandoned by his family.
But his message never got through. Acutely aware of how media interest was now at fever pitch and that some reporting might actually be making Moat's mental state worse, the police had to get journalists on side.
We really had to sit the media down and ask for a blackout so that we could say, look, can we just have a ceasefire in relation to the personal stories that were being printed around Moat, around relationships he had had, about accomplices, all of which clearly, in the mind of Moat, was adding to his murderous intent, and it actually added a new dimension to it, that not only was this about killing members of Northumbria Police, this was about killing the public. If you think you're dealing with something which is at the higher end of threat, you've then got to move it up tenfold.
The public were genuinely scared, make no mistake about it. People in Northumberland were very, very concerned. It was just not known where he was.
The hunt for Raoul Moat was far from over. There would be 3 more tension-filled days before its violent and bloody end.
We're now being moved back. The cordon's being moved away from our initial vantage point here for everybody's safety.
It had been 4 days since Samantha Stobbart was shot in the stomach and her boyfriend Christopher Brown was gunned down in cold blood by Raoul Moat. He'd blinded a policeman, said he intended to murder many more, and then threatened that innocent members of the public would be the next to die.
You're dealing with somebody who, in my view, was about as dangerous as a man can get.
Hundreds of armed officers from 18 police forces swamped the ground, while an RAF Tornado jet armed with specialist heat-seeking equipment circled in the air. But still, the police were unable to find the fugitive Raoul Moat.
As soon as you approach Rothbury itself, it very much is rural. It's in the middle of the countryside. You've got woodlands on both sides, and it's very dense. And all of this you're looking at as potential places where someone could hide. So in terms of concealing yourself in those areas, it's very, very easy and very hard to find someone on the other side of the coin.
And as the days dragged on, fear began to poison the lives of ordinary people in Rothbury.